Hey everybody, welcome back to Keeping It Real with Tiff and Carl. I'm Carl Raven,
I'm Tiff Salcido.
and today we wanted to talk about development. And that word that has kind of a loaded, different meanings, right? A lot of people when they think of development, they think of fundraising, right? I remember when I was looking for work out of college, oh, development, yeah, okay. And I went to an interview and they said, "Have you ever done a fundraiser?" I said, "No, why would I do a fundraiser? And that's not what I do. I don't like asking people for money." So of course I didn't get the job. Right. So some people talk about development that way. Other people think of development as, um, you know, building skills, right, or building something. But there's different ideas on how we can build those skills and build people. And so, I wanted to talk about, what we would recommend, what we think are effective ways to help really build capacity for our staff, for our people, and for our leaders as well. So, Tiff, what's your take on development?
For me, development is a like a lifelong journey, right? It's where we can observe like what the status quo is, what are we doing, what outcomes are we getting? Are we getting a return on our investment of our time, effort, and energy? And if not, then something has to shift. From an instructor standpoint, and one who is always developing curriculum and creating topics for people to grow and learn, I always focus on like three main areas, which is the mindset, the skill set, the tool set. So I'm thinking about like how are you thinking about the topic, and does your mindset have to shift to maybe be more current or up to date, or uh, do you have the right skills for it? So is there something that needs to be taught, a system, a structure, a process, a policy, whatever it is? And then the tool set part of it is always what resources are available for your growth and your development. So those are the things that I try to focus on, but it always starts with a bit of observation of like where are we at versus where do we want to be. There's some
Yeah,
things that don't need development, right? If
yeah,
you like, for example, I love to cook. My mac and cheese recipe is right. There's nothing that needs to change in it. There's nothing that I'm like, how do I make this better if it's already I get the outcome I want every single time. So not everything requires development, but if your mindset, your skill set, your tool set doesn't serve you for whatever your environment is today, that's the opportunity for growth and development.
yeah. And of course, your mac and cheese recipe has raisins in it. Is that correct?
All First of all, don't be disrespectful. Absolutely not. Listen, no.
Let's not go viral again like we did last time with the raisins,
Let's
right?
not have the carrot cake fiasco of 2025. No, but there are no raisins in my, and
Okay.
there's no American cheese, and there's no powder. Okay. All right. I got these bingo wings for a reason. I'm telling you what, I make a good mac and cheese.
Okay. So, Tiff, thinking about that idea of development, I know you mentioned the idea of the mindset, the skill set, the tool set that you are mindful of when you are creating learning opportunities. But in your experience as a learner, as an instructor, a facilitator, and also as a leader, what has your experience been with people being successful or, whatever in terms of development? How good has your development experience been in your experience?
I feel like it's layered. It's very layered. So obviously we there's like certain steps that go into development. Um, there's the beginning part of it before the training even happens, which is let's identify what we want people to know or be able to do. That's usually through like a needs assessment. So we're identifying like what are the skills or what's the mindset or what do we want people to do differently or what's the thing that the actionable, the result. So we always start there. Then we create the training. With training, we're thinking about like learning styles. How do people learn? Do they learn by seeing, hearing, doing? A combination of all three of those, reading and writing. Do they need to have conversations, videos, activities, like those sort of things? And then that moves into where most people think the training ends. People went to the training, they signed in on the sign-in sheet, and then that's it. And that's not it. That's actually one of the very first parts. There's the part that comes after the fact, which is where we now have to observe behavior. Are people able to practice and do the things that they learned in training? And what mechanisms or systems are we putting in place to encourage people to practice that new skill set? Because I'll one of the reasons I became a coach, or where I was kind of drawn to coaching, is that it was the after the fact ability to take what people learn in a classroom and now say, okay, now you have the information. How are you going to apply it? Why do you want to apply it? Like what difference is this going to make in your day to day? How's this going to make your job better? How's it going to make your life better? And really kind of build the practice of whatever the skill is, not just the theory of what the skill is. For me as a learner, one of my biggest pet peeves sitting in training is if you were just theoretical, and just give me a bunch of information with no opportunity or thought in how I'm actually going to apply it in real life. To me, I feel like that's a waste of time, you know? So tell me how it applies to my job. Have me practice it. Can I demonstrate it? And if I can, now when I get back to work, what's the follow-up? Are you like, for example, last week I did a class on motivational interviewing. We had them practice, everything was great. But now you go back to work, is it the status quo where you go back to doing what you did, or are you willing to ask a few open-ended questions? Who's following up to say, I know you went to a class on motivational interviewing, what have you done differently? How are you practicing it? That's the piece I think that's missing in most development, and where leaders have an opportunity to step in to say, Carl, I noticed you attended that training last week. What did you learn? What are you practicing? What's getting in the way? What do I need to do? What tools do you need? How can I support your development? Those are the types of questions I think that are missing from most of the training equations.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing for me, but the biggest challenge as a learning professional, and even as I experienced it as a learner, just never really put words to it. Right? Okay, well, this training is great. What am I going to do with it? Right? I found ways to apply things. I mean, some of the stuff I use today in my trainings were taught to me in my very first UC Davis class when I was a county social case manager, right? And so I learned how to utilize that thing, but there wasn't that formal structure of how are we going to apply this? And that's a huge thing for me. It's part of my personality. I mean, if it's we talk about Myers-Briggs or anything else, like I'm really about practical application. I want to be able to give you something that you can take with you and utilize. And it's great if you can utilize it. We that when we I created a hiring class for the bank that I worked for, and it's a really good class. I mean, every talent acquisition manager that came through, we had about four talent acquisition managers that came through, and every single one of them said, "We need a hiring class." Well, we have one, Carl. Oh, I need to see it. And every single one of them said it works. It's absolutely what we want. That's great. But it was hard to schedule it because people were saying, okay, so we learn this stuff and then we don't hire for 6 months. Right.
Mhm.
And so that was a challenge of that transfer of learning. It's hard to get people to buy in if they don't really necessarily understand it. The traditional model, like you said, is just go out there, provide a good training. Hey, was the trainer funny? Were they nice? Did they have nice quotes that maybe you could write down? And could I walk away feeling like I didn't waste my time? Cool. But you know, if that's all you're doing, if you're just making sure that you don't waste your time, you end up really wasting the company's time and money, right? And
Yeah.
so that's the really huge thing for me. Level three on this four-level model, and I'll show you the model that I'm talking about, and it's from Kirkpatrick. And if anybody's ever been to training school or a training class, staff development class, or this was huge in my master's program, right? Instructional design. You see Kirkpatrick's level, four level model. And
Mhm.
it really illustrates what we were talking about. That first level is reaction, right? So, did you like the class? Was it engaging? Did it keep your attention? Right? Did the learner, I mean, did the facilitator really hold your attention? Were they, did you have activities make you think a little bit? Was it worth your time? Right? And the surveys would show that usually. Yeah, great person, Then level two is the learning. What did we learn? What did we know walking out of there that we didn't walking in there? And so, I see people doing that more and more these days, which is great. Pre-test, post-test. Um, that's a whole nother class as well. Developing a pre-test and post-test. For me, my thing is if you're going to create a pre-test and post-test, it needs to be based off the objectives for the class. Your objectives need to be specific and strategic so that you can use them for your level two, right? And so, what is important that you wanted people to know, and did they know it before, and did they know it after if they didn't know it before, right? Those things are important. And that can happen right after the class. It can happen, a day or two after the class. You don't want to go too far, because of the transfer of learning challenge. But then level three is that behavior. Are they using it? Are they applying it? Is this something that they actually said, oh, yeah, this is what we learned in that class, and this is what I'm doing now. And that's some of the best feedback, Tiff. I don't know about you, but that's some of the best feedback that I get is when somebody says, oh, yeah, I learned so much in the last time you were here, and it really changed, my engagement with folks. And that was, that really, it makes my day. It makes me feel like I'm doing something worthwhile, right? But that's something you want to make sure you want to follow up on 30 days, 60 days, 90 days afterwards, right? Are people still utilizing what it is? And then fourth is the results, right? What was the benefit? What was the business benefit? Right? It doesn't always have to be financial. I mean, there is a financial number, the cost benefit analysis, right? But then also, has it produced more engagement in the long term? Has it reduced turnover? Has it developed leaders, right? Those things like that, where we can look at it in the long range, 6 months, a year down the road. And so that's the four levels. The fifth level that gets added in Phillips ROI is that return on investment. Is there a dollar amount or a percentage of how much did it present? Did it produce this much of a difference in terms of the effectiveness of the organization? But Kirkpatrick's is the classic uh, four-level model for learning organizations, especially in government services, who don't necessarily always look at the financial cost benefit. I mean, they look at the budget, but they don't always look at the financial cost benefit. So that's really what it. I really try to focus on in thinking about that level three learning. I think that's what goes missing. And so, what level there, do you think is important there, Tiff, or something that you really focus on?
These are all important, but I think two through four are the ones that are skipped most often.
Hmm.
And that has a tremendous impact on the way that people feel about the reaction to training when they go back. Because again, one of the things that pushed me to coaching was that I found myself teaching the same classes to the same people in the same counties year after year after year, and they are still having the same challenges. So it's not a lack of information. Training is usually to address a skill gap. So there's something you're not doing or you don't know how to do. So that's what training is supposed to fix. Like, let me teach you how to do something, or, like, let's talk about like how you're thinking about it. Let's shift that. But that's not where the growth happens. It happens in those two, three, and four. So when I think about like the training piece of it, like you can have a good time at training. I guarantee if you come to one of my trainings, you're going to have a good time, but that's not what it's about. You have to learn something. But here's where I think the biggest gap is the training is oftentimes not the problem. It can be, but more often the workplace just isn't prepared for the learning to actually become behavior. They're not ready for that. They think they want it, but they're not willing to change anything to make it happen. An example of this is I do a lot around like conflict resolution and how to have healthy conversations, whether it be courageous conversations or crucial, whatever you want to call it. And there are some very specific like skill sets of how to initiate and have like person-to-person conversations. And again, I put it in the classroom where people can practice, they can, use real life examples and get the skill down. But then they go back to work and they're told stuff like, yeah, no, you can't talk to your coworker when you have a problem. You need to get a supervisor involved. Or no, we don't want the confrontation. So it's best that come and tell us and we'll deal with the problem on the supervisor side of it or the management side of it. And for me, it's like, why waste everybody's time then in teaching them how to do the skill if the reality is you don't trust them to be adults and have those conversations? What was the point?
Yeah.
What was the
Yeah.
point?
And
You wasted all that time and money for what? Because you're not ready for the behavior to change. You still want to hold control over it. And you complain about it like, oh, these people are children, which they're not, they're adults, but we treat them like kids and infantilize them and then wonder why they act like that.
you
And
know,
part of that's that development gap.
that's one of the biggest things I hear and that I see is that, we hear staff. I don't know, we've already mentioned this a few times in the podcast, right, Tiff? But after a class, people, oh, that was a great class. I wish my manager was here, right?
Mhm.
Or, are you going to do this for my staff as well? And then we get staff and management in the room, and guess what? Staff clams up and that's where you can tell there's not
Right.
psychological safety, right? When you have an environment where people are afraid to express themselves and to voice, challenges that they might have or questions that are relevant to them that the manager, may not understand or see as something that's relevant to the conversation. And it's backed up when you hear people talk about I have to babysit my staff. I have to do, and I've had that, hey, so can I ask you a question? Well, you were in the same training I was in. You didn't learn that. Why didn't you write that down? I told you to take notes, right? Those things like that, that does not create psychological safety. That is shaming and judgment. And that's something that keeps people from approaching you as someone who's supposed to be supporting their development. But really, what they're feeling is you're seeing me as someone who doesn't know something, which lowers my feeling of how you view me. And so I don't want to be babysat. I don't want to have my hand held. I'm an adult. I want to, be able to engage in an adult conversation. But we also know that if you don't ask the question, the answer is always no, or the answer is always I don't know, right? So that's such an important factor for leaders. So, I just wanted to focus on that, Tiffany, in the little bit of time we have, just that idea of what advice would you give to leaders in terms of promoting that level three, that behavioral shift and supporting folks in their development and learning?
Well, Tiff's got some hot tips. Tiff's hot tips. I got three of them today. Three of them. So one of the first things that I would recommend is when we look at like training and learning evaluations, stop just asking people if they like it, but ask them questions about like, what do you hope to do differently because of this training? So really define what success looks like before the training begins. Like, what is the specific behavior that you're hoping to shift? And then find a way to measure that. It's not just about evaluating the trainer and the training, but evaluating like what you want the shift to be, and then check in on that. So as an example, if we're teaching those interviewing skills, like what do we want as a result of that? Maybe we want better candidates. Maybe we want to have more equity in our hiring practices. Maybe what we're looking for is um, you know retention and making sure we get the right people. Like that's what we're measuring, not can people follow a post test and name the top five tools or whatever it is. So that would be my first hot tip is stop measuring if people like the training, but ask really about what you hope people will do differently. The second hot tip I have is create opportunities to practice whatever the skill is. So if there's not repetition in the practice, then that learning is going to fade with time. So these are things that you can do, like as an example, maybe have a debrief after the training with the supervisor one-on-one. You have those one-on-one meetings anyways. take an interest. And Carl, I noticed you went to an ethics training a couple weeks ago. Like, what did you take away from that? What was your biggest moment that you had from that training? Have you been practicing that? Sometimes that can be practicing in team meetings or having some peer coaching where we're checking in with each other or after the fact reflection questions. I know as an example, anytime that I have an opportunity to meet with people consecutively, like in a series, that's the first question I ask on the next class is, what have you done differently since our last class? What have you practiced? What are you noticing? What have you done differently? And if they haven't done anything differently, I have them own that too. Like what got in the way of your development? Right? What happened that you couldn't practice this, and what are you going to do differently next time so you can get there? So just create those opportunities to practice and have some system of accountability. This is also where I love the idea of the accountability buddy. I'm going to make that a thing. The accountability buddy. Like, who are you going to check in with after the training to see if you're really applying it? So that's that second hot tip is really just create opportunities to practice. The last thing I want to just share here is that the leaders, the supervisors, the managers are really the what I would consider the learning multipliers. And this is where you have an everyday opportunity to check in and make sure people are growing and developing. And so part of that means as a leader, I have to check and say, like, how am I reinforcing new behaviors? How am I recognizing that people are growing? What am I doing to make sure it's safe for people to practice? Because the workplace, if you're in a leadership position, you're either accelerating learning or you are quietly erasing it by not following up. So if I again am teaching a class on how to have adult to adult conversations and I send all of my staff there because I'm tired of babysitting, as I would call it if I'm infantilizing. Uh, and so now I've taught the skill set. I've made sure everybody went to the training to learn how to have those person to person conversations. Now, if Carl comes to me and wants to complain about Bob, I can say, well, Carl, like, well, what did Bob say when you talked to him about this? I'm going to reinforce that behavior that I trust Carl to have that conversation without me having to get involved if that's what the behavior was intended to be. So it really is about how do we support the learning. It could be like I'm noticing again, Carl is practicing the skill. Like, hey, I heard you on the phone today. I noticed that you were practicing some of those motivational interviewing questions. And so I just wanted to let you know I saw that and great job. You asked a couple more questions before you got to problem solving mode, and that's exactly what we were looking for. So it's just the noticing and paying attention and allowing people to practice it. Um, you know, Behavior doesn't change every night, or I mean, overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. It really requires practice and application and making mistakes and fine tuning before it actually becomes a practice.
Yeah, I agree. Those are great tips, and I have a couple. I don't want to call them hot tips. I ain't stealing from you, but some of
You
some
want
of
to piggyback on my hot tip?
Dr. C's prescriptions here, right? Um, first is like you mentioned, on the one-on-ones, that's a great time. It's been and as we've hammered over and over and over the power of having one-on-one conversations with each staff member
Yep.
um, on a regular basis and honoring those on a regular basis is so powerful. It creates psychological safety. You can have constructive conversations without people feeling like you're attacking them, right? And so in those one-on-one meetings, the last training they went to or whatever else it wasn't just about did you go to training, right? That's the thing. I mean, people write down their performance. Hey, I went to conflict resolution training. I went to this training. Cool, yeah. But what did you get out of it? What is it
Right.
that you would like to work on? And how can I support you in that development, in that training, right? There's a section in the outlines that an organization that Tiff and I both work for sometimes, it says, what are some questions that you want your manager that you would want a supervisor to ask a staff member after the training? And I'm very thoughtful on it, so, and usually it's, what did you learn? And if it's a specific, model or skill set, how will you apply that? right? And how can I support you in that? That's always one of the questions that I put in there because leaders regularly forget to ask that question, how can I support you in this? Right. So that's definitely when we can include that in the one-on-one meeting, create measures of development that we can monitor, right? It doesn't have to go in the performance management objective setting, right? But it could be if someone wants to have something they want to develop that year. The bank that I worked at, our guest next week will be somebody that I worked with at a bank, and we totally revamped their performance management program. And one of the things we did was to add not just business objectives, not just sales or anything else like that, but personal objectives. What did you want to learn? How did you want to develop? How did you want to get better? And we required leaders to put that into somebody's overall yearly performance management measurement, right? So they had to be thoughtful about it, and we really encouraged leaders to have staff come up with their own objectives, right?
Yeah.
And also to add things that maybe you see that the person can do better, but just to be able to monitor that. Hey, so it said you wanted to go to, you wanted to develop your sales skills or your communication skills or dealing with difficult conversations. So, you went to that training or you did that LinkedIn learning. What did you learn about? Not just, hey, did you log the hours? Right. It's
Right.
not about logging hours. Yeah, I can log all the hours I want. I can turn my computer on and go wash the dishes and I'm done with the training as long as I know how to pass the test and I know how to pass
Yep.
tests, right? So
Yep.
that what did you learn? What did you get out of it? How is this helping you? Was it worth your time? Was it worth our time to give you that time to do it? Right. And the next thing I would say is to identify the issue, identify the real issue that's going on. I don't know about you, Tiff, but I'm sure this has happened to you. I've been in a class and I've had people walk up and say, hey, just so you know, the whole reason we're having this class is because those two people in the back, they don't get along and they cause challenges within the team, within the department,
Yeah.
and it's people are choosing sides, and so we really just we want to focus on that and help them get better. Okay, so is that something? And I'm not trying to take money out of my pocket or your pocket, Tiff, but is that something that an issue between two people should warrant a training for an entire division or unit, right?
Right.
If it's a
That's
systemic
a joint
issue,
thing. Yeah.
right? Is this a training issue? I mean, I've had so many people, and that old saying, throw training at the problem, right? But you can throw training at the problem and then the problem still exists, like you mentioned, right? So what are the underlying issues? What is it? Yeah, you have those issues. Cool. What are the causes of the issue? What is it systemic? Is it a process that I can't help you with? Right? I can give you some strategies on how to work through connecting with each other. But if it's a process, I was in a training the other day where they were talking about staff feeling overwhelmed. And one of the biggest issues that staff had with being overwhelmed is that they were on a new phone system that nobody trained them on. And they
Hmm.
were just thrown to the wolves. Well, it's a phone system. You should know how to use it. It's through your internet. So, I mean, it should be, it's intuitive, right? It's intuitive.
Hmm.
And a lot of folks older than us, that stuff ain't intuitive, right? Folks my
It's
age,
for young
right? It
folks.
ain't
Yeah, it's
intuitive,
meant for young
right?
folks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the biggest issue they had was, if I can't utilize the phone system effectively, then I'm not utilizing my time effectively and I'm getting comments for it. And so it's making me resent the whole situation. And so you can send me this training where we can learn how to talk to each other and manage our time. But if you're not going to give us the tool set, like you mentioned, right? I always say skill set, mindset, and heart set for that engagement, but that tool set is so important, right? We're going to skill you up, right? We're going to train you on how to utilize that thing. And we're going to hopefully get you to understand the why and how important that is, which is that mindset and the heart set. But the tool set, if I don't give you the tools to carry out what it is that I expect you to do, then the rest of it is, I mean, all of those components. If one of those are missing, it's an unsuccessful endeavor. But
Yeah.
if we don't back up those ideas with the tools, so that's one of the things I ask in my needs assessment analysis: what tools do you have to be able to allow for these things to change, right? And what issues do people have with those tools? Because I ain't training that. That's not, I'm not training systems. I'm not training how to navigate pages, in your system because I don't work in your system. And even if I did work in your system, we might have different philosophies on how that works. So,
Right.
I want to, y'all need to figure that out. And then let's come together and figure out how to integrate each other within those. I can definitely talk about those and talk about where the bottlenecks might be. But if we don't have the opportunity to have a flush of the system issues, the people issues are not going to get any better. They're just going to keep, I'm ready to go, but the elevator's broken. So I got to walk 10 floors. I can't help you with the elevator. Right.
Right, right. Exactly. Exactly. And
So, yeah, go ahead, Tim. Yeah.
no, I just was gonna say, like all of that being said, next time you send someone to training, don't just ask them, hey, how was it? But really focus on like what's one thing you're gonna do differently and how can I support it? And really just move this idea of training and development from attendance to practice. It's really what it comes down to. And I would encourage leaders and supervisors to attend these trainings and these development sessions as well. Just because you are high up on the organizational chart doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to learn as well. And again, create that space where people can learn with you and not clam up because you're there. If nobody's talking because you're at a training, that's an opportunity for self-reflection, uh, in my honest opinion. So
Yeah. And when we mean self-reflection, we don't mean the reflection that's coming off both of our glasses during the
yeah,
training, which is why I took mine off.
I
But
no
really,
matter what I do, and I have anti-glare on there, and they still reflect the whole time, the whole screen, the whole time.
uh, it's all good. It's all good. I can see you. I'm not that blind, but yeah. But just going past that level one, that smile sheet. That's what we call evaluation smile sheets. Did they like the class? Right.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, hey, look, my 4.5 out of 5, that's my average. Cool. What are people learning? I would love to see something 3 months later that says, are they utilizing what it is that we talked about? I would love to see the results of that. And so if you can dedicate time and money to have somebody be able to do that for you, that really is where behavior change lies. And so it's such an important thing. And so just, if y'all can listen to those tips and, practice them. And if you're already practicing them, tell us what you find helpful, right? And we have socials, right? We got YouTube, we got um, Facebook, we got Insta, we got TikTok, right? So, send us a comment. Let us know, what do you find useful in your ability to effectively develop your staff and maybe some lessons learned. And, your lessons learned can help sprout ideas and other people that are followers of the pod. Our pod is growing leaps and bounds, and it's real cool to see the stats and to see people adding us and just the amount of time people are watching. And it's real cool. But, another important thing that we need, we need you to hit the follow button. If you like what you're hearing or what you're seeing, right? I moisturized for y'all today. I didn't quite shave because I'm getting a haircut later on, and my barber, he likes to keep it
I
crispy,
did.
so I'm letting him keep it crispy, right? But if you're feeling us, definitely hit that follow button. The more likes and subscribes that we have, it really helps us. It helps other people recognize that, we can get more guests because we can tell people, hey, we have these many followers, we have these many people watching, and it really does make a difference. So if y'all are inclined, please hit that button and let us know, how we're doing. Let us know things that maybe we could add to make it better. We're always looking to improve. So with that, I'm Carl.
I'm Tiff.
And let's
Keep it
keep it
real.
real growth, right? Real growth. We want real growth, not just that happy growth, right? Real growth. All right, y'all.